Boom, and welcome to the Big Honker Podcast, brought to you by our good friend Alex Langbell and Gundog Outdoors. I am Jeff Stanfield with the world-famous Andy Shaver.
That is me. Got a little bit of rain?
Yes, rain today. Good rain here right south of the lodge, so good for us. We needed it.
Good for us.
It's greenest dove season we've ever had when it comes to being green. The lodge looks like it's April out here.
Good for us. On the line with us today, we got a very special guest, Mr. Brendan McDonough. Miss Brendan McDonough. I don't know why I keep wanting to say Brendan McDonough. Do you get that a lot, or is it just me screwing that up?
No, I think 90% of the time I get that.
Donahue. And I've been telling myself not.
But it's
and
McDonough.
I've been trying to tell myself, just Donut. That's what you want to call us.
Yeah, Donut. That works
Perfect for me. Usually it's Jeff that's screwing up the introduction.
Yeah,
but,
I fuck them all up, but not this time.
Today it was my turn. So you're there in nice. Are you still in Prescott?
Yeah, yep. Good old Prescott, like Biscuit almost, smack dab right here in the middle of Arizona.
Now, Brendan, I watched your show, the movie Only the Brave, and my dad was a fireman, and I'm telling you right now, the escapades you guys had with each other was just like when I was a kid going to the firehouse. It was all the fucking with each other and bullshitting with each other, and that was really a neat thing. That is a great movie, and I can't believe I haven't seen this movie before. So I'm telling everybody right now, you are the main character, or one of the main characters in the movie Only the Brave. And what's the guy's name that plays him?
It's about his life.
About your life.
Right.
What a great story. What a great story. But
thank you. I really appreciate it.
I want to ask you a question, because movies portray things different. You had hit rock bottom when you tried to become a fireman. Is that pretty correct?
100%, yes.
And
I was at the bottom of bottoms in my life for sure.
Well, the movie portrayed to me as when you found out is this lady your wife now? Am I allowed to ask that? Your little girl you had?
Oh yeah, you can ask that 100%. No, we're not together, and so I'm 100% active in my daughter's life, and she actually spends the majority of her time at my house or home, and but yeah. No, we're no longer together, just young and dumb. I think I was 19 at that time, and, things happen in life.
Well, it spoke a lot of your character, though, because from the way the movie played, that was a tipping point in your life when you found out you were going to be a dad, is when you really stepped up and become a man.
Yeah, I think for me, growing up without a dad and finding out I was going to be a father, there was kind of no other option. I just seen the path I was going on, or turning my life around and becoming a father. And so every ounce of me wanted to be the dad I've never had, especially for a little girl. I think little girls definitely melt your heart, and she's still got me wrapped around her finger, even, 11 years later. And it's just, it's a different experience, and it was a huge motivating factor for me. The only one, to be honest,
right.
To turn my life around. I really didn't care about myself or didn't care how I ended up, but now I have a child that I'm essentially responsible for, and that was highly important to me.
Did you really take groceries over there every week like it showed in the movies, or was that more of the movie stuff, or is that actually how that went?
It was kind of the movie stuff. So we were together for about 2.5 years, or 2 years with my daughter. And so I was with her mother until she was about 2, actually. And then we had split up. So when I had first gotten hired, I was living out of my car and just kind of couch surfing. And so I'd send her some money here and there, but pretty quick within getting hired, I'd say within a month we were living together. But, I might have done that once or twice, but not for a long period of time.
You're right.
It was pretty quick that I was able to gain that trust back, just because, there was no making mistakes working for the fire department. They're gonna find out, and either I'm gonna get fired or something's gonna happen. And so I was able to kind of gain trust back pretty quick. And no one really knew the extent of my drug abuse either at that time. Like, no, only the people I'd used with, none of my family, my daughter's mom didn't know that I was out, using heroin, etc. They just kind of thought I was just being young and dumb with alcohol and weed or something like that. But it was pretty far down the rabbit hole.
So you were on heroin. How would you take heroin? Would you smoke it?
Yeah, I would smoke it. Thank God. I was deathly afraid of needles. I had an experience when I was a younger kid where I was getting a shot or something, and I reached for the needle, and I ended up dragging it down my leg
Ooh.
in the hospital, and so that just kind of gave me this like fear, like just even up until I was like 16, 17, 18, 19, I'd get like a shot and I'd cry,
Right.
I wrestled, played football, boxed, did a little bit of everything, and had a pretty high pain tolerance. But when it came to needles, like it just scared the living hell out of me. And so I mean, not that one's better than the other, but I think there's a lot higher chance of overdose with using IV use. So I'm pretty fortunate there.
Now, what got you? When was your first experience with heroin? How old were you?
I was 18, and so I had used a lot of prescription pills growing up. It kind of kicked off right around the time I got my wisdom teeth pulled, and so instead of just stopping, I called the doctor, the dentist up, the office. I said, "Hey, I dropped a bottle of the pills in the toilet. Like my teeth are still killing me." And then a few of my friends had their wisdom teeth done around the same time, and they didn't want their pills, so they gave me their pills. And it really kicked off from there as far as like opioids. And it wasn't until I was 18 that I had found heroin, and it was just cheaper, cheaper, almost easier to find, and a better high. And it just made sense. So I didn't use heroin for a whole long time, but probably about a year or so, maybe a little less, on and off.
Yeah, we've talked about that before here. It's a crisis going on, and it's really affecting housewives. Come to find out, because they get their knee scoped or something like that, and they have a routine surgery, and then the drugs become too expensive for them, so they have to turn to cheaper heroin.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane when you start looking into the opioid epidemic and how it was pumped by a big pharma company. I think, I don't want to say the wrong name, but this family essentially owned it, and they were pumping false marketing about how it wasn't addictive and giving kickbacks to doctors and everything else to use their opioid. And so that was, I think, about 20 plus years ago. And then to kind of fast forward to where we're at today is just insane with fentanyl and how it's just coming across the border. And it's just, it's even cheaper than heroin. I mean, it's the cheapest I've ever seen such a powerful drug in my life.
Yeah.
It's wild.
I've been listening. I'm a big Packer fan. So Rogers went on the Joe Rogan podcast, and they said on there that 75% of the commercials that you see on TV are a pharmaceutical drug. It's a drug of some sort. And I did not know that. We're one of two countries that allows medication to be advertised on television.
But they took cigarettes off in the 70s because of the same problem, because it was a bad idea, but it's okay to use drugs.
75% of the commercials you see are a prescription
what
drug.
You said about the kickbacks, that's what we're finding out. That's what we're going to find out in about 5 years about the jab with this COVID shit. Was all about making people rich. That's all it was. And that's what's coming on with all this other shit. I mean, every conspiracy theory seems to come true 5 or 10 years down the road. Mm-hmm. And the jab is the new one now. It don't work, but someone's getting rich. And I think Pfizer's made $300 billion profit off of it. Well, I promise you that's not in the bank under Pfizer. That's spent all over Washington, D.C. with both parties because they're all crooked bastards. Anyway, it's going to get me sidetracked on that shit. But
you're going to get them fired up.
You can't trust the pharmaceutical companies.
No.
You really can't. And it's unfortunate because we put so much trust in, some of the medications that they're coming out with. And it's sad. It's sad the way that America has allowed the pharmaceutical companies to take advantage of people, diabetics, for insulin and just all these different medications for cancer patients. And it's like, well, if you don't have the insurance or you don't have a few $100,000 in your pocket, you can't find healthy happiness. And we're paying for all that research 90% of the time. So it's money that's coming out of our pocket that we're paying for research for a product that we have to pay for.
It's a
and
sad,
somehow they're profiting. It's mind
That's what drives me nuts. The fucking money.
I love our country, but man, it is horrible.
It's run by crooks. The 1% are a bunch of fuckheads.
The fucking money that we've sent to Ukraine, and I'm just like, we have a very good friend in town, and his son is diabetic. The what is it? The type 1? What's the kind that you're genetics?
That pediatrics get? I think it's type 1 diabetes or type A.
Anyway, it was a genetic thing. It wasn't from poor diet or anything like that. But it's insane what this kid has to pay for insulin. What his family has to pay for insulin.
Yeah.
But yet, meanwhile, we're going to send billions and billions of dollars to the Ukraine
and get free.
And we're not going to fucking worry about little kids with diabetes over here. It's mind blowing.
And the thing too is it's all a part of the ploy, right? And so it's like we should be doing all these things we're doing, but to keep us distracted, they keep us frustrated with doing this or doing that, or like I'm in recovery, and so like a big thing is Narcan, right? And so they give out Narcan for free, or it's a part of your insurance plan that you can receive Narcan. And a lot of my friends that aren't in recovery are frustrated that that's free and the insulin isn't. And it's like, we can't blame the people that are receiving this service. It's the system that's set up that's not allowed us to really see young kids thrive and get this medication. And I can go off on hours for this, but probably one of us will end up dead or something. So
before this, I want everybody to know, like, I do not have any suicidal thoughts or tendencies. So like, if something happens, my brakes go out or something. But
did you see
in
where
Austin, Narcan's free?
Yeah, you're in Arizona. Speaking of that, did you see where the guy that broke the news of the Clinton tarmac deal when Bill Clinton talked to the old attorney general? The guy, they found that guy dead this weekend.
In Arizona?
The guy from Arizona that reported it happened in Phoenix at the tarmac. Bill Clinton got with the attorney general when Hillary was running for president against Trump. Anyways, that guy found out, I think he hung himself and shot himself in the head 4 times. It committed suicide by shooting himself in the head 4 times. But whatever it was, typical
very, very
Clinton
common
bullshit. Let's get back to this movie stuff. Were you on set much during when they made this movie?
Yeah, I'd say so for me, I was on set about 50% of the time, and then they had a handful of other former crew members that were on set 100% of the time. And a part of that was just how personal a lot of it was for myself. And so they didn't want to make it awkward for some of the actors that might have been portraying certain scenes. And so, but kind of from the beginning, I was a part of it, and just also wanted to involve other crew members to make sure that the story was told right, and to really, allow the film team to really get a good picture, because there was another gentleman that was involved, and you've seen him in some of the interviews, and he was on the crew for about twice as long as I was, and knew some of the full-time guys for many years. And so I wanted to make sure that they received different perspectives, but also just my fire knowledge and experience was pretty limited comparatively to some of the different things that they were portraying in that film. And so fortunate in that sense that the film was really on board with making sure the right people were there for the right scenes, and trying to portray, as honestly as they could, with it being Hollywood to the sense as well. But they really, I think when it came to a lot of the fire scenes, they really did a phenomenal job, and were willing to tone it down, because there was a few things that they wanted to put in there that I was like, there's just no way in hell. Like, they wanted to have like a falling rock take out a truck or something like that, and I'm like, it's just not, that's a once in a lifetime experience. We could definitely portray things that have happened, but I don't want to falsify or make up fire scenes that just aren't realistic.
The bags, when the guys get under the bags, how does anybody really survive? Have there been people survive that same situation with those bags?
I mean, there's been people that have survived burnover situations, but not to that intensity. And so, kind of one of the things that I've learned since that tragedy is for like some countries, like other countries, they won't even carry fire shelters because they feel like it's a false sense of
Right.
security. And even though these fire shelters could withstand, up to I think 300, 500-degree temperatures, the issue is what's the breathable oxygen. And so if you don't have, oxygen at a temperature that's breathable, it really doesn't matter what those shelters can sustain if you can't get oxygen in your lungs. And so I think that's one of the issues. And I know there's some good people that are out there that are trying to tackle that issue, but it becomes what's too heavy, what's too much, and so they're trying to balance all that out, kind of way beyond my pay grade and understanding. But I know NASA, they're taking a stab at it. They've been looking at it. There's I think it's Jim King. His brother passed away in Storm King, which a handful of firefighters that unfortunately passed away. And he's been working on different products, and he's actually gotten some products in place. And so there's some different partnerships with like 3M. There's a lot of research that's going into it. It's just the biggest issue, I think, is the breathable air.
Right.
You can have a tent that can withstand and keep something from, getting burned under there. But at what temperature, does air become not breathable by a human being, and for how long? And so I think that's one of the big issues that's happening, is trying to find, something that's reasonable. Like I seen something yesterday that overseas, there's somewhere that they're using exoskeletons for wildland firefighters. I don't know if there's any too much truth to that, but I know the U.S. government, they've got some stuff. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next 10 to 15 years, especially with like the decline of physical labor with people. There's gonna have to be something that's gonna make it happen.
What happens with, how long does it take that? How long did that fire take to get over them where it's past them?
I don't know the exact details, but you think a fire's moving, you've got a wind behind it and it's moving, 30, 40 miles an hour, a wind's pushing it, and with terrain, you're probably in a burnout situation anywhere from 3 minutes to 15 to 20, just kind of depending on the fuel type. And so, there's light grassy fuels where it just burns real quick and cools down real quick. But, we call them, 10-hour fuels, 100-hour fuels, and 1,000-hour fuels. And so some of that organic material that's burning that brush, I mean, it's hot for a while. And so, realistically, if they could come up with a shelter that, you want to double what anybody would see, so whatever that time frame is, that they could, create something with breathable oxygen, then be able to withstand a certain amount of temperatures. But in that situation, that specific burnover with my brothers, I mean, the temperatures were just absolutely insane just because of the wind and where they were located, that, unfortunately these freak accidents happen. And there's even if they had something double what they have today, I don't know how much good it would have done, just because of how hot it was and not having that breathable air.
So for people that are unfamiliar with what happened, kind of break it down. It's one of the most tragic days since 9/11 in firefighter history. Kind of break down what had happened. So like the wind switched, and that was what just led to this thing basically blowing back at your brothers.
Yeah. So the wind had shifted essentially, and during the monsoon season, what happens in Arizona and the Southwest is these storms come in and they bring either torrential rain, they bring lightning, they bring wind events, kind of a gauntlet of all of them at once, or just one of them, or a multitude of both. And what happened on June 30, 2013 is it brought a wind event. And so this wind event essentially turned this fire around 180 degrees, but also brought, I think the gusts were up to about 50 miles an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And so as my brothers were making their way into town to kind of reassemble, re-engage, they got cut off by the fire. And that's how they ended up deploying their fire shelters that we were talking about earlier. And just because of just the fire shelters are just not meant for what they withstood. You know, they passed away. And yeah, and a part of that too was a whole nother weather event building upon it. But I mean, that's just kind of the intricate details. So it was just kind of a double stacked weather event essentially that pushed through. And I mean, I think we lost like 100 homes, you know, within this community. It was just a super devastating day all around, you know, as far as losing homes, obviously the massive tragedy of my brothers. And just to see that kind of fire behavior is becoming, unfortunately, more and more common. But man, that's a whole nother story of wildland firefighters and what's going on with them right now.
Now, let me ask you this. They were heading, in the movie at least, they were heading for like this ranch. Is that where they were trying to get to?
Yeah, so there was this, for the family's sake, I won't say their name, but there was this ranch, and it was claimed as a safety zone just because it had fuels removed all around from it, and that was one of the safety zones that had been marked earlier that day, as well as just road access throughout there. So they have road access into town, which I mean, up until their property and their home essentially burned around everywhere. And so if they'd have made it to that property, they'd still be here today. And they were within, I want to say, a few hundred yards of that property, but just that fire was moving so fast, and people think, oh, why didn't they make a run for it? But it's like the smoke's laying over, so you can't see, so you're choking on smoke. And you know, we don't do training with, you know, smoke inhalation or anything like that. We don't have respirators or fresh oxygen or anything like that. So, you know, what you do is you hunker down and you deploy your fire shelters and try and get water dropped and try and get resources there. And that's kind of exactly what they did leading up to that moment that they had passed.
Yeah, I can only imagine, and especially like you're in the hills and the mountainous range, and you know, when the smoke starts laying down, like you don't know which way you're going. If you get turned around at all, or if you kind of stumble or trip or cough, I mean, then all of a sudden you're like, well, fuck, which way do I go? I mean, it's just smoke everywhere I look.
Yeah, and when you start, I mean, that smoke inhalation starts messing with you too, right? Because you're getting less oxygen and you're not able to focus. And I mean, I'd imagine it's kind of similar to like almost similar getting the pepper sprayed, right? Kind of that kind of level of, you know, I can't really see straight, I can't really think straight. I mean, I've been on some fires where we're in a safe place, but the wind's just blowing it over so much that you're just choking it down. And you can't, you know, you start crying, snotting, and it's not a good spot to be in.
Now let me ask you. You said that it's becoming more and more frequent. What's leading to that? Do you think?
I think a few things. I think there is a climate change that's happening. I think that's. I don't think we're arguing over that anymore. Right. I don't know what that looks like or what cycle we're on or what the history of that is, but we're just seeing the climate change, and it's a part of the natural progression. But what happens is we have homes in all these areas where it's happening. And so there's more at risk and more to be put at risk. And then also it's just poor management of the forest. You know, I think there's a healthy amount of logging that we can do. I think there's, you know, in certain areas, it's become like a year-round fire season. So like California, you know, they're getting year-round wildfires. They've seen wildfires in December that have been devastating, and they've got the Santa Anas. And so I think as more people build out in the wild and urban interface, we're going to see these fires get worse and worse just because we're limited in what we can do near those homes, right? Mm-hmm. And so like doing a controlled burn or a prescribed burn in some of those areas isn't a good look, because a lot of people are like, oh, the smoke, or they complain about this or that. And that's not even on top of like the temperature might not be right, all these things. And so if we're not doing fuels work, logging, or prescribed burn, we're really not managing what we've been given. And so there are areas where they do allow kind of a management style, and that's usually in the wilderness where there's not homes threatened. They'll kind of let fires do their thing and do naturally what it's going to do. But when you have homes and lives that are threatened, you have to intervene. And so when we intervene, there's repercussions to that. And I think they're now figuring that out. But also there's hiring issues within the wildfire community that they're trying to figure out.
Getting a phone call? There you go.
Did
You're
that
back.
cut out?
You're back.
There's hiring issues, there's pay discrepancies, there's benefit discrepancies. And so like the wildfire community is really being tapped as far as their resources. And just recently, there's been some new bills that have been signed. But I mean, we're talking, it's the start of something that should have happened probably 20, 30 years ago.
Right.
As far as getting mental health services, and as far as getting just a pay raise, right? You got these men and women who are out there and they're making minimum wage, 12, 15 an hour, to go carry 45, 60 pounds for 16 hours straight, fighting fires, dangerous job for 2 weeks at a time. And God forbid you get injured, because you're just going to get workman's comp. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Or if something happens in the off season, you're not covered under it. There's just a million things that are going on, and it affects too, like right into hunting. Right. And so we talk about conservation and everything, and there's just a lot that isn't getting done. That's just kind of getting pushed to the side. That, we've seen it in Northern California when they had, they lost a few hundred homes, and another fire in California where, like, I think it was the largest loss of civilian life in a wildfire in a century or something like that. And it's like, we're not managing it. It's too hot to burn it.
Right.
So we got to log it. We got to do fuels work, but no one wants to work that hard, or very few people do. And you look at like PG&E and the lawsuit they had, it's all fuel stuff. It's all just mismanagement and neglect, really, unfortunately.
Because in California, they don't clear out the dead wood. They just, if a tree falls, it just lays there, right? So I mean, isn't that just tinder whenever these events do happen?
Yeah, and so which is a part of the ecosystem too, but there's no window out there to do any prescribed burns anymore.
Right.
They rarely have windows to do prescribed burns, and that's one of the big ways that we kind of help the forest have a healthy environment. And so it's almost like fighting a wildfire if you were to do a prescribed burn out there, and that's a lot of resources and a lot of risk. And so they're trying to mitigate those risks with how they see necessary. And I think some logging, I think, would be, to an extent, I think would be huge. But a lot of these fires are in the brush, and it takes massive machines to be able to clear a lot of that out.
Right.
Did when y'all were training for this, is that the Granite smoke jumpers, or is that
Hot Shots?
Hot Shots. Is that a full-time year-round paid gig?
For about half the crew it is, but the other half it's seasonal. And so there's anywhere from like 8 to 12 full-time guys, and then the rest, which I was a seasonal, so we get brought on for the season, and it kind of varies where you're at. And so our season ran from about April to September. And so we worked for a municipal department, so it was a little different than the federal department. The feds, they have, I think it's a 1039 rule. So if you hit 1,039 overtime hours, you're pretty much done. There'd have to be like some kind of like national emergency enacted for you to continue working, I believe. Unless you're a full-time salary employee, that's different. For us, we didn't have that rule, but usually about 1,100 hours of overtime, you're pretty well done for within a 4, 5, 6 month period of time. You're pretty much fighting fire back to back, and it's pretty intensive. And by the end of the fire season, I remember starting off the beginning of the fire season looking good, fit, six pack,
It felt good.
by the end of it, you're just kind of like worn down and your body's just kind of eating away at itself and you're not, you're still physically in good shape, but you're just worn down,
Right.
and your diet's changed up a little bit. And so that's part of the preparation and, getting into the job and kind of learning that and having that experience from other people that have done it for a long time.
That's a young man's sport then is what it is.
I think so, but there's a lot of men and women that are out there that are kind of like up in, 30s, 40s, and even older than that are still hot shotting that is super impressive. And so there's a few people that I can think of that I have a lot of respect for that I'm just like, holy cow, they've just taken care of their body and really put the work in and probably had a few surgeries along the way. But
right.
Yeah, if you see someone that's in their 40s outside of like a superintendent or captain that's on a hot shot crew, even then they're still, every superintendent for the most part, they're working out, doing the same runs, doing the same hikes. Usually they're the ones leading it and they carry an intense pace.
Yeah.
Like I remember being 19 and our captain would take us on runs and he was 6'2", 190, 200 pounds. And like the dude just moved like a cheetah, and I'm 150 pounds and I can't move as fast as him, and he's cooking it. And so, yeah, it definitely is a young man's game, but a lot of respect for the ones that are out there that are still in it, just getting after it.
Did you really get bit by a rattlesnake?
That was going to be my question.
I didn't. And so, the way that had happened, one of the advisors that was on the crew, he did. And so he was telling one of the writers and the director this story, and they're like, man, we got to fit this in there somehow. And the scene where I'm in the hospital, I was actually at one of my friend's funerals. And so they were trying to weave that in. And so why is Brennan in the hospital? And then they tried to have some subtleties of like my substance abuse and kind of recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And so they hey, do you want, I think it was morphine or something. And it was like, no, I don't touch that, or something along those lines. And so, but yeah, rattlesnakes are out there all the time. Like people are getting bit somewhat often, and they wanted to squeeze that one in there. And at first I was like, no, it's got to be 100% accurate. And then they kind of told me about like storyline and writing and how to make a movie. And I'm like, okay, I don't agree with it, but I'm going to go ahead and say yes, just because someone else out there has experienced it, and it's a danger of the job. And so that's kind of the gear I had to switch with some of the liberties they took, was like, we want people to know the dangers of this job, and maybe it didn't exactly happen to me or this way, but it's something that could happen and has happened. And we want, to highlight how dangerous this job really is, so people understand, because we're kind of the redheaded stepchild of the fire departments,
Mm-hmm.
The fire world in a sense, but I think in the last few years since the movie, really, it's gained a lot of steam and kind of notoriety, and just with the bigger fires, it's inevitable that people are going to hear about it on the news.
Why do you think that y'all are the redheaded stepchild? Do the other fire departments kind of treat you like the JV team or something like that?
No, I don't think that. I don't think, because they know what's up. When it comes down to it, we're out there fighting fire 24, day in, day out, and they run medical calls, and they got a tough job in itself, but physically, like, for the most part, people who are in wildland firefighting are in great shape. I think it's just because we're not in the public eye as much.
Right.
We're not driving in the red shiny trucks, and we're not running on calls and stuff, medical calls and stuff like that. And so I think just when we get called out, we're in the middle of nowhere most of the time. But now that's changing. Now you see hotshot crews hiking through neighborhoods, right, to get to a piece of line, and that's crazy, but that's the reality that's becoming truth. And so I think it's gaining more and more attention. And I think as wildland firefighters too have stuck up for themselves with some of these bills that have passed, and just really voiced their needs, I think the communities are starting to really, I guess, just recognize them. There's always been a respect level. There's always been gratefulness from the structure side, and like even talking with guys back east that they'll never run into the wildfire. They're just like, you guys are crazy. I don't know how y'all do it. And I'm like, I wouldn't be frozen on a ladder in -30 either. So good luck, you know?
Yeah.
And there's nothing but love too, you know. I don't want to paint a different picture, but they're just in the limelight more, you know, the structure side. And I think as people become more educated, they start to learn about what we do and how we do it and what it looks like. And, you know, even movies like the Planes movie through Disney, right? Yeah, that was a great movie. It did a lot of good for the community, and, you know, it allows, you know, people to become educated on that. So I think it's changing quite a bit.
Do you know how far? What's the furthest you walked on one of these outings? Is there any way that you kept track of anything like that?
You know, I think there was one day we had worked a 36-hour shift, and so we worked 36 hours straight, and we burned almost 80% of that time. And like, it was probably the most favorable burn I've ever done in my life. Like, the winds were perfect, the topography, there was not much that messed with it. So it was just nonstop moving. I think we put in, I want to say like 12 plus miles that day.
That's who Fitbit needs to make a contract with these hot shots and see how many calories they're burning. Like, what's the step count? What's up? That's the number I want to see. Fuck Patrick Mahomes. I want to see what these hot shots are putting in.
Yeah, and nowadays they can do it, but back then, like, I didn't have none of these watches or anything. When I fought fire, it was kind of the age of technology, so 2011, 12, and part of 13. And so I'm sure if I sent out a message, I'm actually going to do that on Instagram and just ask, like, hey, what are some of your guys' top days out on the line? Like, what are the miles you put in? And because most of the time we're cutting line, and so, not that it's a slow process, but it's a very labor intensive process. And so it's,
what does that mean, cutting line? Explain that.
So just when we're fighting fire, you can go indirect, direct, and a lot of times you're going indirect, which means we're cutting a fuel break. Okay. And we're going to burn off that fuel break. And so sometimes it's 100-foot wide of a fuel break. And so any fuel, trees, doesn't matter if they're, you know, 8 feet around, whatever it is, it's got to get moved. I mean, we're not dropping 8-foot wide trees, but, you know, if it's 60 foot tall and if it's 2 feet around, like, it's getting, then we're moving it. And they're cutting all the brush. And so, you know, we can burn off that piece of line, and we're tying it into something else that might be burn, a river, a road, where the fire won't get over. And so essentially for us, it's just trying to put a box around the fire. Mm-hmm. And so we're using roads, rivers, ridges, indirect line, direct line to kind of piece all that together. And but even then, I've seen, you know, a few miles done within thick topography of an indirect line where you've got multiple hot shot crews working on it. It's impressive. I mean, we used to always call it glorified landscapers, you know, like that's it. Like, we're, you know, and that was kind of the running joke, and then God's landscapers, because, you know, God can move mountain and earth, and here we are moving it off the ridges, you know, and that was our job, and that's our job today too. I mean, it hasn't changed much of how the tactics are of fighting fire. I mean, it's grown, it's evolved, and there's a few more things in place, but, you know, we still use hand tools. They still use chainsaws. You know, there's some dozers and some fellow bunchers that can get into some different spots, but for the most part, it's still you know, kind of basic hand tools they're out there using to fight these natural disasters, essentially.
Do you see any of the guys that you had on? Do you see any of them? I mean, are the guys that didn't survive, do you see their families much in town?
Yeah, somewhat often, I would say so. And then there's, you know, there's a memorial every year, so I'll see some of the families there. And then some of the families, our kids, kind of have been involved in the kind of the same sports systems or maybe the same school systems. And so, like, I ran into one of the fathers today at the gas station. And so we just connected real quick. Not as often as I used to. Just because early on there were so many different things that the families were being pulled into for a few years. with fundraisers and events and things like that. And so not as often as them, but somewhat often, we'll run in, and then some families I do have some relationships, and we'll spend some time together here and there.
Now, when they approached you and said, "Hey, we're thinking about doing a movie about the worst day of your life," or one of them,
Yeah.
definitely top
Mm-hmm.
2 or 3, was there any hesitation on your part, or were you thinking, no, this is a story that people need to hear?
It took me probably 3 to 4 months of actually probably longer than that, to be honest. About 3 months, the producer had contacted me, and I kept telling him no. Or I didn't even tell him no. I just didn't even respond or kept blowing him off. And then I had talked with a few people and had been introduced. Actually, I'd reached out to Marcus Luttrell. And so I was just like, hey, here's my story. And this was when he was just doing a speaking tour, and the film had just come out. So he was super busy. But they got back to me and said, hey, we're going to be in Phoenix. Marcus, love to meet you. And so kind of in short, Marcus told me, like, hey, don't be selfish. Like, your brother's story deserves to be told.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and you're the person that has that torch to carry, essentially. And so after kind of hearing that, I was like, okay, this is someone who's done it. Right. He's told his brother's story. He's on the other end of it. The movie just came out. And so I was like, okay, well, can you help me find someone to represent me or something? And so they had put me in touch with a few different people, and was amazing. A lot of help. And so I finally ended up meeting with the producer, and then I kind of told him, like, hey, I can't speak on behalf of families. Like, you need to get a hold of them. And he was like, well, can you put me in touch with them? And I'm like, you got to figure it out, man. You track me down, you can track them down.
Right.
And so he went on it. The first time I met him was actually in the middle of Idaho in the wilderness.
Wow.
And so I was working for a nonprofit, the Wildland Firefighter Foundation. God bless them, man. They did so much work for myself and many other families, and for decades, and still are today. But myself and Burke Miner, the new executive director of the foundation, he had a property in the middle of Idaho. We took him up there, and we camped out at his property in a yurt and just had a campfire and just talked and kind of met in an uncommon area, right?
Mm-hmm.
And was able just to connect with him. We did a little bit of fly fishing, and was like, all right, man, like, you seem like a all right person. And Mike Mitchell, the producer, his biggest thing was, I have 2 daughters, and I want my daughters to be proud of what I do and the integrity I have. And he kept his word through and through, 100%. He kept his word through and through. And so he met with some of the families and chatted with them, and then kind of started putting it together, and it just kind of took off from there.
I mean, listen, they did they did everybody well with casting it. They got some of the most attractive people in Hollywood. So, like, it would have been my luck if anybody ever did a movie about me. I'd get the fugly guy. I'd get like Danny DeVito playing me, and it's like, well, motherfucker, we should have never done this.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they got beautiful people to portray these people. So.
Did they?
Very talented,
yeah.
Very talented actors that took it serious.
And that's funny that you say that you met Luttrell, because one of the guys was also in Lone Survivor.
Yeah, so Taylor Kitsch ended up he was in Lone Survivor. He played my best friend, my roommate, Christopher McKenzie. And then I had met some guys in Dallas from 13 Hours. And so James Badgedell was in that movie, and he played my captain. And I had met him actually before he had even been chosen for that. And I'll never forget James Badgedell. We were on set, and it was one of the first fire scenes. And he pulled me aside. He said, "Hey, man, this is the way it's written out in the script, and like, we have freedom to kind of move around this and do what we think." He said, "I feel like Jesse said it like this." And I remember him saying it, and like, I started tearing up, because like, it was it. Like, this dude he had done his homework. He had done as much as he could. And he looked nervous almost, like, and he was in deep thought about this. I think it was like a one sentence line.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just thinking on it, and I can kind of see him pacing, and it made my heart settle, knowing that this is how much energy and effort these men and women are putting into this film. And you could feel it across the board, from lighting to catering to everything. You could feel that. And I didn't know that going into this experience. And some people have had bad experiences with Hollywood, and I'm super fortunate that wasn't the case for me. Like, everyone that was involved had a passion for this, and had a true desire to tell my brother's story and to honor them and to honor the wildfire community. And you don't hear that all the time about Hollywood, but I mean it. Like, I'm very fortunate that team was put together.
Did this is a question everybody that's listens want to ask? Were the families, did they receive any kind of financial compensation?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't know about the financial compensation. I know there was a fundraiser that the movie had held for that distributed some different nonprofits, and I know there's many fundraisers beforehand. So I honestly, I couldn't answer that question.
One thing that I read, and I can't tell you if they did or not, but I know some of the families were, like you said, they were the full-time, part-time thing. And one of the widows, like, my husband is full-time. And so,
yeah,
they kind of, I think they tried to screw her over, but I think she ended up
she set precedents for a lot of the other wives. And the argument that the opposing side, whoever it was, I think it was the city or something, came up with was just, like you had just said, like, it's not full-time work. And it's like, well, yes, it is. They work actually more than full-time. They work 1,000 hours of overtime within a 6-month period of time. And that's kind of the loophole by laying people off. Mm-hmm. Right. And so there was a few other arguments that were dismissed. And so she had won that case. And then that had allowed some of the other wives who didn't have the benefits to be able to apply for those. And at that point in time, after that, from my understanding, I believe the city they weren't fighting it. They understood and kind of, lost that battle, I guess, per se.
You have to be a real piece of shit to fight someone on that.
Yeah, to split hairs. Oh, no, ma'am, we're not going to pay you whatever else you're owed. Your husband was only part-time.
This has nothing to do with this tragedy, but in Entourage, what's his name going to be playing a smoke jumper? Wasn't that part of when that show was going out?
I never saw Entourage.
Oh, you didn't? Well, anyways, during that series, one of the guys plays this big actor in Hollywood, and that was going to be his next big thing, is he was making a movie about smoke jumpers or something.
I don't know
about the guys, but don't some of the guys jump from parachutes into them things too? In some places, or is that just
yeah, smoke jumpers? No, they're intense. And what's crazy about smoke jumpers, I mean, the job alone is insane, right? They're jumping out of planes, jumping into fires.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But they build all their gear.
Really?
Like they're like seamstress. Like their parachutes, the padding, everything they wear, they sew all that. And so if you go to a smoke jumper base, you can go to the one in Boise and the one in Missoula, and they do tours. You'll see like where they have this huge table where they're stitching, a lot of their stuff. And not everyone is certified, but there's, a few people that are certified to be the seamstress, to put those together, then also to pack the chutes. And then like the gear they're wearing, like if you watch the videos on Instagram, like they're putting on like hockey shin pads,
right?
When they're going to jump, because who knows what they're jumping into, and a lot of times they may not have a perfect clear landing, and they're jumping into trees. And, there's unfortunately been some fatalities around that, but they're making it, they're hitting hard a lot of times when they're going through there. And they're intense, man.
Yeah, they've got to have special equipment, because they got to have somewhere to hold their fucking balls.
I mean, you're jumping into a forest, so you got trees around you. The odds.
Yeah, I mean, they have something special, and their physical testing is even higher than being a hot shot. And it's always impressive. You know, they're definitely at the top of the food chain, and some elite men and women that just get after it, and highly smart, educated too. You know, and kind of the tactics they use.
Well, I
and
mean, y'all are no dummies. I mean, you know, listening to the way y'all talking, you know, about the just all the stuff that has to be right and all the things that you have to be looking for. Like, is this fire? Is it going to start fizzling out, or are the conditions just to where it's going to be a hot, fucking, fast moving fire? So, I mean, y'all are no dummies by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, I mean, there's a massive amount of people and energy and teamwork that goes into it, and it's impressive, man. You know, when you see a few thousand people immobilize on a wildfire,
Mm-hmm.
you know, overnight, right? You see an open field and there's nothing there, and then the next morning there's 15, 20 command tents, and there's, you know, catering trucks, and there's printing and Wi-Fi in the middle of nowhere so we can get mapping, and there's a heli base, and there's a tanker base, and there's, you know, makeshift. It's just insane, you know, and it's impressive, especially when you're like in the Montana wilderness, right? And you've got this set up. In some of these bigger cities, it's like, yeah, that's pretty cool. But when you step into a city where you have more people on this fire than that live in the community, it's like, okay, this is pretty wild.
I bet Google Earth has made y'all's job just a hell of a lot more simple. Because, I mean, now you can pretty well see, you know, exactly kind of the topography and what's there. And I bet Google Earth is a very popular app amongst hot shots.
I think it's been helpful, but honestly, there's nothing like. I remember this brought up a memory. We were looking at Google Earth of a piece of indirect line we were going to do, and somehow I had ended up being somebody that could actually look at this map. You know, I was a 2-year seasonal, and it was. I remember my soup was like, "Yeah, we can see it, and we can see the topography, but we can't see what's under those trees. We don't know how thick that brush is. We don't know how much dead and down is in there. We don't know." And I remember when we put that piece of line in, those spots where we were kind of questioning and coming up, and it was just a mess in there. Just a mess. And it's like there's only so much you can see from the sky, even with planes. You know, there's nothing that beats your feet hitting the dirt. And I think that's what separates this job from a lot of others. You know,
that makes sense. Were you worried? You got a visitor now. When this project came up, were you worried about what it would do to your emotional state, as far as, like, you know, I mean, now all of a sudden you've got to relive it, and I'm sure you had just started the healing process, and now all of a sudden you got to relive this, and it's not, making a movie is not a quick, you know, we're not just going to do this for a couple days. Like, it's a couple month process. So now, like, you're constantly reliving this. Was that difficult?
It was difficult, because at the time we were doing the filming, I was still drinking, and so I had done about quite a lot of counseling and had healed a lot of wounds, but still was drinking and not really taking care of myself. And so I still haven't found the right words, but I'm watching men portray the men that I loved and lost, and they're doing such a good job at it that it's weird. Right. And so, like, I remember the first day on set, and, you know, the actors are no longer being called by their acting names. They're being called by who they're portraying.
He's Donut.
And that's Chris, that's Jesse, that's Eric, that's Tony, that, you know, all my brothers. And I mean, it brought up a lot of stuff. And, you know, but the arrogant side of me was, you know, no matter the cost, they have to be honored. If this scars me, whatever, I'll deal with it later. Like, they deserve their story to be told in this spotlight. And one way or another, I can't change the outcome of it either, because though the filmmakers got everyone's approval and everything else, I don't think this set of people would have done this. But a different set, they'd have done the film either way.
Right.
They'd have found a way to do it. You know, maybe not that year, but somebody would have found a way to do that film. And, you know, if they had to leave something out or this or that or not use someone's name, someone would have done it. And that's, you know, something I found out through this filming process. And that's why I was thankful that the people we did work with were even open to feedback and listening and actually putting in the work. And so it definitely was emotional. When I watched the film for the first time, completed from end to end, I was sober and I had given up drinking alcohol and found a relationship with God. And thank God I did, because I would have went off the deep end. I wasn't on set for the burnover scene. You know, it was too emotional, too much. And it just didn't, there was an amount of pressure and a sense of getting it right that by me being there would have probably messed with that.
Right.
You know, a lot of the actors, I didn't know this, but I'm a pretty easygoing guy. Like I'm a pretty easygoing guy. A lot of them felt stressed when I was around sometimes for certain scenes. And so I told them, I said, hey, like, you know, I'd like to be here to be able to help, but I also don't want to hinder your process. And so when I seen that for the first time on the big screen, it was, I sat in there for about 2 hours after just crying, you know, just crying and crying and crying. But it was also cathartic because it gave me an insight into what my brothers may have experienced that I wouldn't have gained any other way. Because as I watched it unfold, I couldn't see some of the details. And so just the smoke as it was laid over and the chainsaws and the guys digging and just kind of the emotions that may have happened, it gave me closure of something that I wondered, you know, what was it like for my brothers during that burnover? And I felt a lot of guilt for not being there and surviving. And so it gave me a piece of closure to see it on live. And then, you know, knowing that other people would witness this, I knew it would be super emotional, but I also knew like, this is the dangers of this job. And this has to be told. Like, we can't skip over this. We can't, there's I don't want to say there's not a happy ending to it, but it happened, and that's the way it happened. And that's the truth. And by changing that or altering the loss of those 19 men would do them and their families a disservice. And so it's a tough film to watch.
It is. Yeah.
You know, it's great. There's some funny moments, you know, leading up to it, but when you hit that burnover scene, you're not being emotional about it. And you know, which I think is good too in this world. Like, people need to find opportunities to feel those things, because we're so clouded by other stuff in life.
Now, and I can see where this would be like a healing process, because, you know, you have, you know, you've gone through this and you've always got, you play it in your head. Like, you know, you make it up to be kind of this boogeyman, this, and you're always wondering like, what were their final moments like? And then when you can see something, and, you know, obviously we'll never know, but you can see and like, okay, that is probably how that could have played out. Like, so I could see where that would be a healing process. When did you decide to quit drinking? How long after the film premiered?
It was before the film had premiered. So when the film had premiered, I think I had.
Okay. All right.
Oh, yeah, not a problem, man. I think I had 6 months.
6 months.
And so, like, I was pretty new in sobriety. And I remember just thinking to myself, like, because we're doing red carpet premieres and, you know, like I say this a lot, and I'm not trying to blow smoke up their asses, but thank God, like, the people that made this film cared. You know, like, I remember the first night we were at one of the premieres, and Josh Brolin came up to me and was like, "Hey, man, have you emptied out your mini bar yet?" And I was like, huh? And Josh Brolin, he probably won't mind. He's in the program. He's in
Right.
recovery. And it was just that little subtlety, right? And then some of the producers would check in and see, hey, how you doing? What's going on, and what's happening, and how are you doing with all the emotions and everything. There's a lot of preparation that went into me sitting down in front of a camera for 8 hours straight, doing back to back to back to back to back interviews, and a lot of preparation on their end and an investment into me, which I'm thankful for. I had a few coaches that I worked with before the premieres and stuff, of just how to redirect conversations the way I wanted it to, how to handle, some reporter asking a question that, oh,
You're good.
okay. Having a reporter ask a question that I didn't like, right? That maybe was going to incite something out of me. And there's a lot of preparation that went into that. And even the tone was set. The day before, 2 days before I was supposed to fly to LA for the premiere, my grandfather ended up in the hospital. And I remember I'm sitting there, and my grandfather pretty much raised me as a young man and was the father figure I had. And he's in the hospital. And my grandma calls and she says, he's probably not going to make it. And I'm like, what do you mean? What happened? And so I call up the production team, Sony, and I say, hey, my grandfather's in the hospital. I need to go see him. And I get emotional thinking about it, because I'll get back to the premiere as soon as I can. And without a hesitation, they just said, hey, take care of what you have to take care of. We'd love to have you here, but if you can't be here, we 100% understand, and let us know how we can help you. And so they booked my wife and my flight to San Diego. They had a driver for us that took us to the airport. I mean, they took care of it, and I got to spend some time with my grandfather and have some closure, and it kind of looked like he was on the mend. And so they said, hey, he'll probably be home in a week or two. And so the day the film came out nationally, which was when I was done with all of the premiere stuff, so 2 weeks later he had passed. So October, I think it was 20th of that year. And so it just really goes to speak to their character,
Right.
of like, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn or anything, but I'm one of the main guys that's a part of this film. And myself and Pat, who was one of the guys who was, helping out with a lot of logistics, and just from the fire experience, he was on the crew. And so, without hesitance, they just say, hey, family comes first, and any way we can help. And they stepped in and made that happen. And halfway through, we were doing all this, I flew home and was able to get baptized in my church. And, so it was a powerful experience during that time. And, it was a lot to experience, but I had a lot of support and was very thankful. I had guys from, my Bible study and, my recovery meetings, just call and text it, because there was a pressure to drink, just because I was reliving all this. And but it just felt okay to say I had a problem with it, and it was super super nice. And like the producer, Mike Menschel, we made a great friendship, and a lot of us stay in contact till this day. But his wife is a recovery counselor. And so like he would check in with me, and she would check in with me, because, at this time me and my kids were at his house. We had dinner, spaghetti dinner with his family, and all these different things, and across the board had these experiences. And so, I had different type of mentors in my life that knew that, and a lot of, unfortunately, embarrassingly, a lot of the actors and a lot of the people part of the film seen my alcoholism, seen me drink way too much, seen me get kicked out of a bar, and that was super
Oh, shit.
embarrassing and something I really don't
They saw you get kicked
enjoy
out of a
talking
bar?
about. Yeah. Oh yeah. Plenty of times. Yeah, plenty. Yeah. I mean, I think only once in front of them, and once was enough. But I had a moment where I made an ass out of myself in front of one of the producers and his families. And like, you know, I was so thankful and grateful that like kind of the next time they saw me after filming, I was clean and sober and I was able to make amends and apologize for those things. And also be thankful because a few times, a handful, like say, hey, Brennan, like, maybe you think you should get some help with this, and had the courage to say that. They could have just kept it 100 and kept moving on with the movie and just say, hey man, we'll just deal with him later. But
Right.
they had the compassion to say, hey, if you're willing to, if you want to get help, we'll help. And I just kind of pushed it off and
How did you
just
handle that
after that.
whenever they told you, like, whenever somebody would tell, because I'm sure you had multiple people tell you, like, hey, man, you need help. What was your attitude
Yeah.
like? Would you blow up at them and I'm fine? Was that your attitude?
Yeah, no, I didn't blow up at him. I just kind of hit that attitude of like, no, I'm fine. Like it's just that one time. It happens to everybody. Because my thing was binge drinking, so I wasn't drinking every day. I drink a handful of times a month. Like you never find liquor or alcohol in my house ever.
Right.
Maybe on 4th of July, and it doesn't. The disease is so tricky, right, of addiction, and so it doesn't show its face, and so I justify it by like I work a job,
Sure.
I'm home for my kids in the evening, I go out every once in a while, but when I did go out, I mean, I was causing pure chaos and carnage.
Yeah.
Like I was not stopping once I started. If you got in my way, you were getting hurt, whether verbally or physically. And on the inside, at the end of the day, I was just looking for a way out and a way to die.
Mm-hmm.
That's the sick part of it, and it took me a while to realize that. But yeah, when people, even close friends, man, I've known for a long time, and I think people just kind of learn to they learn to be like bumpers
Mm-hmm.
when you're bowling with your kids.
Right.
They just kind of learned to be that with me, and then finally I just realized like I've caused so much issues and damage that I can't continue to do this. Like if I have a death wish, then go ahead and go forward with it. But if I still want to live, like I can't drink. And I found that peace with God. I ultimately found that peace with a relationship with him and that forgiveness of some of the stuff I had done and people I had hurt. And you drink for that long like I did, you miss out on things.
Sure.
My daughter,
Yeah.
you throw trauma on top of it going through this experience, and you throw alcoholism, and it's like there went 3-4 years of her life
Mm-hmm.
that I may have provided a roof and had money and clothes and food and everything else for her and taken her on trips, but intimately being there, I was absent for some of that. And so I'm just thankful that I figured it out sooner than later, and I get to not make up for it, but make a difference.
Sure. Did you contemplate taking your own life during the midst of all this?
Yeah. Early on, within the first 2 years, I had a few times where I had a gun to my mouth, and it wasn't that I wanted to kill myself. It's just that I didn't want to live
Mm-hmm.
with what was happening in my head.
Just with the survivor's guilt, or just everything on top
Yeah.
stacked up?
I mean, I hate to like you said, this is kind of one of those things where there's no filters, right?
Sure.
So my brothers, they're being transported in the hearses from Phoenix to Prescott from the mortuary, right? Prescott couldn't handle it because it was just too many people at once, and so they're in Phoenix. And we do this huge procession, right? This 4-hour procession from Phoenix to Prescott, and there's thousands of people involved in this, right? Firefighters, motorcycle clubs, people on the side of the road, just everywhere. And we get to Prescott, and they said, "Hey, Brennan, do you want to help? Move your brothers into the mortuary?" And I'm sitting there thinking, "Oh, they're in caskets." Like, yeah, that I'd be honored. to do that. And I remember we opened the first hearse, and that's an orange body bag.
Oh no.
Like, it's not a casket.
Yeah.
And you go to grab the bag, and like there's a lifeless body in there. And as we're going through this, I'm looking at the hearse, and I see the name. And so at this point in time, I'm 22. I'm a young fireman. Like, I'm not backing out of this. Like, I'm not going to let someone else come in here and step in and carry my brothers. Like, these are my brothers. And so I keep going on, and I'm crying. And I remember my chief asking, he's like, "Hey, you okay? Like, you want someone?" And I was like, "No, like no one's taking this spot." And there was one that the bag was kind of like open, and I remember I looked down and I see a leg, and it looked dirty. And I'm like, man, I thought they were supposed to clean him up, but it's from where one of my brothers had been burned. Mm-hmm. And so all 19 of them are loaded in the mortuary, and they say, "Hey, do you want a moment alone with them?" And I'm thinking to myself, like I didn't know what to do, and like I don't think everyone knew. They couldn't tell me what to do either, because I was just not like taking people's advice at that time. And so I was making my own decisions. And so I was like, they've asked, so I probably should be in there.
Right.
And so I walk in there, and I'm in this room, with 19 of my brothers, and I'm just like, what do I even say? And from that moment on, like, I couldn't eat red meat. Like, really? Anything barbecued, like anything that resembled
burnt flesh.
That, yeah, that I seen, like I couldn't even get close to.
Wow.
And there was multiple times where that kind of stuff would haunt me. Mm-hmm. Like, "Hey, Brennan," I somewhat shared this before, and it's been a long time since I've gone to this depth, but "Hey, Brennan, my roommate Chris, did you know what dentist he went to for dental records and stuff?" And so I'm trying to help, like, track down dental records of my, and so all that stuff just kept playing in my head. And I'm watching these families that have lost their loved one, and they're just going through it, and I'm sitting here like, my daughter's got a dad.
Right.
Like, I haven't lost anything physically. I've lost them, but as far as like comparatively, like, they've lost everything. And so I have no room for complaints. I have no room for, like, I can't, like, what am I going to say compared to what they're going through? And so I kept compartmentalizing that and pushing it down. And a handful of times, man, it drove me to want to not live anymore, because I couldn't cut that thinking out of my head.
Well, I mean,
there was nothing I could do outside of drinking myself to black out to be able to stop thinking about some of those things. It was just so intrusive. And that's PTSD, yeah. Right? PTSI, however you want to put it. And I thought for a long time that's how life was going to be. Like, I'm going to live. You hear about those old Vietnam vets, sure. Right? And you see them, and it's like, that's what I'm going to be in 40, 50 years if I don't end up, killing myself or dying from drinking too much.
So I lost my train of thought. Jeff, take over for a second.
It's a heartbreaking story. I mean, I don't think there's just not very many people outside of war that would ever be a lone survivor of a situation like this, and that for you to be 22 years old and to go through that, that's
what I was going to say.
And there's nothing those people could tell you, because they don't know what to do either. That's not something they'd ever
just
been
like with
exposed
them
to.
Like, do you want to be with your brothers for a minute? Like, hindsight, being what it is, like, that might not have been a great idea for a 22-year-old kid to walk into a room with 19 of his brothers that are stretched out there. But, like, nobody knows how to handle situations like this. Like, death is an awkward thing. Even when it's just 90-year-old grandma that you love dearly, like, nobody knows what to say at those things.
Yeah, there's no workbook for it, right? And so, like, and I don't blame anybody for anything, because everybody had the best intentions of helping me and honoring my brothers. And like you said, there's no book for this, man. Like, you can't, what do you do, right? And even then, like, even if you do, like, I had the world offered to me, quote unquote, and I wasn't willing to receive it because I was too stubborn. I was too much in pride and ego, and I was too afraid to admit that I had a problem. And I didn't, and by me saying I had a problem, I felt like that would minimize what any of the families were going through.
You didn't want to talk about
you. I didn't.
You don't want to talk, oh, woe is me. It's like, you don't want them looking at you side-eyed like, motherfucker, you're still here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like, and rightfully so too, because I love those men, and it's like they lost something that I didn't lose. I did have a loss, but I didn't lose, what some of these fathers and mothers lost, their child. Like, over time you learn, and you watch it's from that kind of magnitude. Like, you see how that's impacted these families, forever. This is forever that they'll have this experience. And not only, is it a tragic loss, but for a while, you brought up some of the lawsuit stuff. It got ugly for a while.
Yeah.
And that causes trauma, and it creates wounds that, shouldn't be a part of loss and grief for people, especially for, first responders and their families that, they're making this ultimate sacrifice, and they have to deal with all these other little issues that go on that become bigger issues, and just day-to-day life. I remember I was in a head-on collision in the midst of all this, right? And it didn't faze me. Like, I remember getting in a head-on collision. Someone smashed us at 45, jumped out of the car. I'm like, oh, nothing's broke. Wife goes to the hospital, and, that's it. End of story. Like, there's so much other pressing issues in my life that, literally I recovered within 45 seconds of getting out of that truck, honestly, because I was so numb to everything that it's just like, dude, this doesn't even compare to what's going on in life. Like, what, this is nothing. And I say, there's no workbook, man. There's no workbook for getting through this. And the only way you get through it is by going through it, with a counselor, with somebody, somehow. That's it. There's no workaround. There's no take route A or route C. There's just route B. That's the one you got to take. You got to get through it.
We're gonna start wrapping up here. So, what is Brendan doing now? What's your life looking like now that the hot shotting days are behind? What are we doing?
Back in the glory days. So 4 years ago, I started a recovery center for substance abuse and trauma. And so after going through my own issues, I just realized a need for the work that we're doing. And so we work with men from all over the country that come stay with us for anywhere from 45 to 120 days. And, they get individual counseling. They get so many different services through us. So I do that. That's Hold Fast Recovery. We're located in Prescott, Arizona. Website, Facebook, we have all that out there. And then I do public speaking as well. And so that's kind of a passion of mine. So I kind of work, with some departments that, like someone asked, hey, can you come out in December and come talk with us about mental health, your personal experience? And so, I work in that realm as well. And that between that, the 3 kids, keeps me.
So you've got your recovery center, you got your speaking engagements, you got 2 kids you're chasing around. Life is good.
3 of them.
Three of them. I've only got 2, and they're a handful.
Yeah.
So
100%.
So life is good now.
Life is good, man. Ups and downs like anyone else, but I think, I finally have the tools to be able to push through a lot of these things, and, comparatively to what I experienced and what every day today is like, it just doesn't even come close. So every day is a gift. I try and live that out and kind of paying it forward and trying to hopefully help someone else that's in a similar situation to me that kind of needs that, just okay to be fucked up, right? But it's okay to get help.
That's exactly right. Well, listen, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I'm so glad that, you're like you said, you're paying it forward. There's people that need you, and you're there to help. So if there's anything we can ever do to help you with your programs or anything like that, you got my number. Anytime, reach out, and we'll do whatever we need to do. So it has been a pleasure talking to you, and if there's anything we can ever do.
God bless you, young man, and keep going, keep being strong.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. God bless you guys.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Very interesting story. What a tragic day. Gosh almighty. It was a great movie. I'm telling you, I never seen the movie. I
Only
watched
the Brave. Go check it out. It's on YouTube TV. That's how I watched it. It's on demand on YouTube TV.
It is a great show. Josh Brolin, he plays a hell of a spot.
Yep.
He was a very good actor. He's a great.
Came a long way since the Goonies.
He was on the Goonies?
Yeah, he's the older brother.
I didn't know that. Great movie.
I think. Now you got me questioning myself.
It is a great movie, though. Very, very, very good movie. Highly recommend it. It's a good story of a bad day.
When Ron was drinking, he drank all the time. It wasn't like Brendan.
No, he worked. Yeah, but he didn't drink all the time. He didn't drink from the time he went to bed at 11 o'clock at night till when he woke up. Dad didn't usually start drinking until 2 or 3 or 4 in the afternoon.
But like he said, he would go days and weeks and months, and he'd find a reason to drink, and then it was.
Dad drank from about 4 or 5 in the afternoon till he went to bed, I guess, and then he would. He's a fireman, so 24 days out of 48, he had to be sober. That's probably the only thing kept Dad from not being really in bad trouble.
All right, I got to get out of here.
Great
Great interview. Go check out Only the Brave. It's on YouTube TV. Right.
God bless and have a great week.
Check out all of our wonderful sponsors. Go check out Pacific Calls, Boss Shot Shells, Dive Bomb Industries, Gundog Outdoors, Shin Gear Waders, Lucky Duck, Looking Glass Duck Club Podcast, Alpha Outdoor Specialties, Bangtail Whiskey, Stanfield Hunting Outfitters, Dirty Duck Coffee, Ducks Unlimited, and Double T British Kennels.